This is a 102.7 FM Toowoomba original podcast.
Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Today we're talking to John Randall, who is walking himself stupid. Hello, John.
Hello,
Welcome to
Megan.
Big Little Small
How
Talk.
are you?
I'm great. Now, why are you walking so much at the moment?
I have developed this strong interest, brackets passion, only recently. I've always walked. I've liked walking. I've liked the relaxation of it, the visual bits you see. But it's just recently all the stars have aligned. I read a book back in 1959, before you were born, and it was called A Short Walk in the Hindu Kush. And the name always appealed. The 10-year-old in suburban Brisbane, that's where you went. You hid under your bed and you read a book. And it was written by this guy in the fashion industry out of London who got sick of the fashion industry, had married well enough to use some of his wife's money to go on this expedition from Istanbul to Kabul. And it was such a funny, even as a 10-year-old, I got the satire, the humor of everything he encountered. I mean, he went through stuff, Iran is called Persia. It's all the names and borders and conflicts have all changed. But it was just so interesting that this guy, and then a travel writer called Bill Bryson, he writes very good satirical, humorous novels about travel. And he wrote this book in the early 90s called A Walk in the Woods. Walk in the Woods is a bloody 10-day trek through the Appalachian, and which they've since made a movie of. And it's always in the back of my mind, I'd like to do something like that. So that's a long story short about how I've come to this stage where I now am 2 weeks' time doing a 50k stroll along the Tweed River.
Well, just tell me, we'll go to that Tweed one in a minute, but I think it was about 2 weeks ago, you did Trek the Trail. Tell me about that. That's a 75k one.
Yeah, that was 75k. That was over 2 nights, over 2 days. It was down the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail, which everyone in Toowoomba knows where it is because we drive over it because it's just past the Caltex Servo at the Esk turnoff. And it's the old train line, which they pulled the train line up, but smartly at last didn't get rid of the rail corridor. And that goes from Ipswich up to Blackbutt. And so a very clever lady from the Toowoomba Hospital Foundation said, why don't we do a charity hike, 75 people over 75 Ks over 2 days, raising money for it. And at last count, it's 150,000, which is really good because most charity events these days, to make 150,000, you probably have to risk $100,000 before you can make the money. Whereas this, all you're risking was the well-being of 75 trekkers.
And how did you go? I'm not saying that you're not a young man, but you were the oldest, I believe.
I was the oldest. I was a little
slow.
I was the oldest. I was a little pissed off that they didn't make it 76 Ks because they did it on the day of my 76th birthday.
Oh, wow. How
so, but I got the extra K in because I walked 500 meters to an off-track toilet and back. So I did that. So I came second.
In terms of time or money raised?
In terms of across the line.
Right.
I came fourth
fourth
in money raised, which was great. And I think almost very kind, generous sponsors for that. But over the line, I got beaten by this 30-something female. It was only 3 minutes. It wasn't a race, but as more fall off along the track, it becomes a race at the end. She beat me by 5 minutes, which was great. because she was the one who organised it. So hats off to her.
You could give that to her. What were you raising money for?
The Toowoomba Hospital Foundation, their big focus this year is the cancer centre out at the new Bailey Henderson Hospital. And that's providing cancer support for cancer people undergoing and people post cancer treatment. A great cause. But like anything, it's never fully funded. So I'm hoping, and I've already spoken to the people at the foundation, that we certainly do it again next year. Maybe make the distance a bit longer and raise a bit more money.
I don't know that there'd be too many people who are begging for the distance to be a bit longer. How did you prepare for the walk?
I live on the side of a slight rise in Centenary Heights. If I look out my bathroom window, I see Mount Lofty. If I look out the bedroom window, I see Picnic Point. And I look out the living room window, I see the USQ flagpole. So USQ, the Picnic Point to Mount Lofty and return is 25K. So you do that twice a day.
Twice a day?
You build up to it, up
Yeah.
to it. And I didn't have any blisters. I mean, of the 75 who started, only 51 finished. And it was like the old movie out of the 70s, they shoot horses, don't they? Where people go round and round this roller skating track, and the last one left standing earns the money. It wasn't as brutal as that, but there were so many blisters and joint illnesses. But it was very well run, very well catered for, and yeah, a really great experience.
Had you ever done anything like that before?
I did an Oxfam one in Sydney, from Hawkesbury down to the Sydney Harbour, which was 100K, well, 100K was the length of the route. And I got to 53. I enjoyed this one a lot more because Oxfam, this is pre-COVID Oxfam, and Oxfam ones, they're like city to surf, bridge to bridge, thousands of people. And whereas the good thing about along the Brisbane Valley Rail Trail and this 75K trek, it's almost like a Queensland version of a short walk in the Hindu Kush.
How many Ks did you walk every day, and where did you stay at night time?
It was roughly 38K the first day and 37K, and totally coincidental, not coincidental, that's why it was planned. We started at Blackbutt and finished at Toogoolawah. Halfway between those two towns is the town of Linville. And Linville has a country pub, very good country pub, country food, and a very big beer garden playing Dire Straits till 2:00 in the morning. I didn't stay there because that was booked out. That was luck also. I stayed at a place about 500 metres away at a place with the strange name of the Trail Refuge. And I thought there was a place where people dumped their dogs or something. No, it was called Trail Refuge. And it was very well done. It was almost done like ski lodges I've stayed in. And architecturally, everything worked. Everything was very slick, run by a great couple. And mainly the Trail Refuge caters for bikers, cyclists. But we took it over that night and we didn't have to listen to Dire Straits till 2 a.m.
Just as well. Did you ever get to the stage where you were really exhausted, or you just had done enough preparation, enough training?
I didn't. The only injury I received was this lady, and I just wish I was a cartoonist so I could draw it. This lady who probably should have gone to Jenny Craig rather than the trail, trying on her eco bike, which the wheels spin without you having to pedal, up this rather steep hill. And because she was spinning her wheel because the poor bike couldn't get her up the hill, she lost her balance, knocked me into a piece of lantana. So I had a blood stain down my calf for the next 2 days.
That would have been very good on Funniest Home Videos, I think.
It would have, and my best thing was I didn't swear. I realised it was a family event. I didn't get sore. I didn't feel exhausted. The worst thing not worst thing. The major thing was boredom. And if I was listening to not Big Little Lies, I always call it that. If I was
Small
listening
little
to
big talk, as James O'Shea calls it.
Big Little Small Talk, if I was listening to podcasts of that, I wouldn't have got bored, but I didn't turn my headphones on.
Yeah, well, I did want to actually ask you about that because you do so much time out there on the road. What do you listen to when you're training? Do you listen to the radio?
On your recommendation, 5:30 every morning, I listen to Sally Sahara, ABC RN, and then
Of course, you're listening to 102.7 FM most of the time.
yeah, I then had the most eclectic range of music from Merle Haggard, 70s bleeding heart country songs, Cyndi Lauper, Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Diana Ross, and the strangest eclectic, and all of it's got to have a beat. So my foot comes down when the bass hits the floor. That's when my foot hits the path. The only thing with Sally Sarah is that she's not there till 5:30. I always get up at first light, and first light at the moment is about 20 to 5, so I can hit the road at the first little tinge of orange or pink, whatever colour it is, over Picnic Point.
Do you go rain, hail, or shine?
Hail, no. Rain, I don't mind. I don't like strong wind because, and it's strange that, see my profile, I've gone down, as I said, I've gone down about 3 or 4 dress sizes since I've started this. You think I'd have less to blow, like the full spinnaker's not there, but I think it's because I have less mass. I remember sometimes I go along Tourist Road and those bloody afternoon southwesterlies, and I think I'll find myself down at Helidon if I don't hang on too much.
You're a twig. What about your appetite? Has it just gone crazy?
No, I've had some dental work done just at the middle of the prep, which anyway resulted in me not being able to bite. Yeah, had no bite, no chew, no nothing. So I lived on thoroughly processed, and I checked very much that you can spend 5 minutes in the food processor and the doesn't affect the goodness in the vegetables. So it was always vegetables. So I developed a taste for that. So, and then that chopped up food became nice spicy soup. And so I've probably gone, sorry, Range Meat Company, I've probably gone on a vegetarian diet, not for any ethical reasons, but it's just easier to eat. And also, if I take snacks along with me and they're all veggie, it doesn't matter if they're 2 hours in the sun on my back.
Have you ever done like the Camino or any of those sorts of things?
This
Larapinta?
would be the first time I've been asked that question, so I know how to treat it politely. The Camino to me is far too fashionable, far too crowded, and almost the people who I know have done the Camino, most of them like wearing the badge, I did the Camino. It's like every child gets a prize at the mirror. And also, I'm more challenged. I've worked out I do it as a challenge. I don't walk around with my mouth open saying, oh, look, there's a blue-breasted wren. Oh, look at that lovely tree. I'm doing it for the physical challenge to get from A to B, like point to point. And Camino is, and there's other ones, there's ones through the Pyrenees and whatever. They're a bit too spiritual for me, whereas my I suppose, the crazy things I do, people probably think I'm spiritual too by doing it. But, just looking at that mountain there on that calendar, I wonder if there's a track at the top of that mountain.
You can't climb Uluru anymore, John. That's one thing you can't do.
That's not Uluru. That looks like
Oh,
Kilimanjaro.
sorry, I
top
beg your
blown
pardon.
out.
It has been turned over. So you do a lot of, it seems to me, a lot of charity stuff because I actually first met you when you were up at Hope Horizons. And what were you doing there?
Slight correction there. You first met me in a professional capacity when you were doing a locum in Warwick at a local optometrist. And you had me in a chair in a dark room asking me very involve questions. But we won't talk
I
about
beg your
that.
pardon. Sorry about
But
that.
yeah, Hope Horizons. So Hope Horizons, which is a great charity providing medical care and treatments for cancer sufferers, patients, and also for their family. It covers massage therapy, diet, psychological, etc., etc. And they, courtesy of local businessman Harvey Black, who donated a large amount of money, they were able to build a purpose-built centre out in North Street in Wilsonton. And like all great grants, the grant was for the building, not for the grounds. So with my experience and expertise in garden design, I was asked to come on board, can I help with the design and the initial planting? That morphed into what I thought might take me 4 weeks. That morphed into 18 months. And last time I moved on from there in 8 weeks ago, whatever. And last time I saw it, it was looking beautiful. And that was probably the biggest, professionally in my garden design business, the most challenging and rewarding gig I'd ever done, because there was no money. Literally, there was no money. Everything was begged, steal or borrow. We didn't steal anything, and we didn't borrow anything. We never gave it back. And it's really worked out. It doesn't look like a local preschool, with all apologies to any preschool community garden. It looks very professional, and it's easy to look after, and it's sustainable as far as it won't need enormous amounts of money to keep it going forward. I was there as the on-site voluntary contractor, and some really good other contractors in town helped out. Without their help and the generosity of local suppliers, it wouldn't have come together. I was out there last week for the opening of an art show, and it just looked perfect.
Very proud.
Now the edges looked a bit raggy.
You might have to get it back out there. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. This is Big Little Small Talk. We're talking to John Randall. John, you said sort of jokingly we didn't have to we big borrowed and stole everything, but you did actually have someone who stole the plants from there. Tell me that story.
Megan, I wiped out. My therapist said wipe that.
Sorry.
No,
There's a lot of trauma to
seriously,
come, don't worry.
I hadn't thought that. Yeah, that was true. Some and I think there's a demographic term. Some grub decided that he needed it was what we did, what I did, was there's close to 2,000 plants we planted, and about 1,000 of those were grown on from me, from stuff we got from pro bono, from nurseries, whatever. And we had them in a compound at the back of like a container. And the container was never locked. There's no security, no whatever, or the yard was never locked. And one day I got there, and like you always know, you had so many of those, so many of those. This grub had jumped the fence, which was only about a metre high fence, jumped the fence, came in, and walked off with about retail value, about $1,000 or more than $1,000 of stuff that I've been looking after, and I had the place already picked out for the night. And initially I felt angry, let a few words fly, and then I felt very sad that this grub had thought he could rob a charity of something which was going to provide benefit for hundreds of people. And and I think I spent about 3 days in remorse, didn't want to get out of bed, all that type of stuff. It was really, I'd never been in that situation before. And really, compared to people having their house invaded, there was nothing. It was just plants. And then this lady turned up, and I've forgotten the name. Eh?
Lynn Wade.
Lynn Wade, thank you very much. Mrs. Lynn Wade turned up and say, "Hey, I'm Lynn Wade." I got out, Lynn, and like lots of people wanted to talk to me because I'm famous. And I thought, oh no, I haven't got the time. I've got to go and sort out what's happened. And she said, "We have a family get together on the property at Millmerran. I think it's Millmerran. We would just had a family property, right? A couple of hundred people come from all over Australia for this family reunion. And as the night wears on, the language gets a bit colourful. So we've done a swear jar and something along the lines of, $1 for a bugger, $5 for bastard, and, for the ultimate, it's 20, right? And she said, I'd like you to have the proceeds, or I'd like Hope Horizons to have the proceeds of our swear jar from our night round the fire pit out at Millmerran to replace the plants. And that was, I'd forgotten that. That was the highlight of the stay there. And then other people have come in with other bits, but Lynn was a total stranger to Hope. She had no connection with it. She knew through friends of friends or whatever, but she said, these 4 people, they can have the proceeds of the swear jar.
I did love when I read the story in the paper, Joe Cap, who was the long-term sort of driving force behind Hope Horizons, said, we're not going to hold any anger, or something like this, I'm paraphrasing, but we're not going to hold any anger to these people because if they're desperate enough to steal them, perhaps they need them more than we do or something, which I thought was a very generous thing to say.
I think Joe probably mentioned that, I wasn't listening to it at the time. But when I read it, I thought, yeah, that's the way to move on. And now when you talk about it, I remember Lynn turning up perfectly. I wiped from my mind the CCTV coverage of this guy jumping the
Oh, you did
fence.
have the footage.
Uh,
Now tell me, I did want to talk to you about Botanical Design, but what I do want to talk to you about, because you had such a varied career and all the things that you've done from, economic development in Vanuatu and Belon to Western Australia, but how do you go to being written up in the paper as Mr. Randall, widely tipped to be a contender for the mayor's job in the next council election in March 2012, to where you are now? So you're living in Warwick, you're getting tested by some random person at the optometrist.
yes. Yeah, so I was the economic development manager at the old pre-amalgamation, the old Warwickshire Council. That was a really good time because back in those days we had something, you probably don't have one in Toowoomba, called a local newspaper full of local content, not TV ads. The newspaper always had a bit of a fractious relationship with the council, like they always did. And I was probably the mediator and reduced the heat on that because in economic development, everything's always a good news story. You don't want to talk about bad things. You want to talk about good things. So I gave the paper quite a bit of good news. So even though I was, we had a public affairs lady who did all the official council stuff. I had a good relationship there. I had a good relationship with the Win News people. When they had a, believe it or not, they had every Thursday was Warwick Day on Win News, and the local radio stations. The whole lot was good. And I saw things needed, through my work capacity. I could see opportunities for doing things better for the town, better this was the Warwick town, right? Before they amalgamated. And I had a good relationship with the business community and also with the majority, well, all the community groups, the old people's groups, etc. And so amalgamation, so I had that, and I managed those relationships because you have to manage because otherwise you see or other people see a conflict of interest. Come amalgamation, Stanthorpe Shire hates Warwick with a passion. Warwick doesn't hate Stanthorpe, so they really didn't recognise them. They're almost invisible, which I think would have been better if but anyway. So they had to blend the two councils, and they had an economic development department down there. We had one up there. We had workplace conflict, yada yada, and I was the one who came out second, right? So I moved on. And that's when the people were tapping on the shoulder. Johnny, you should be mayor. And I said, no, I don't want to be mayor.
Did you ever entertain the idea?
Not being mayor, being a councillor, I did. And I ran a good campaign in Warwick. I didn't get one vote because back then you were able to check the polling booths. I didn't get one vote in the Stanthorpe Shire. So most of the people who did get votes in Stanthorpe Shire were totally unknown. But seeing I was seen as the face of the enemy to what Stanthorpe wanted to do, I ran a good campaign, came 9th out of 8. And on reflection, I'm not cut out to be a councillor because I don't think I would have the empathy to deal with an ongoing suite of people's complaints, which I wouldn't agree with. And that wasn't my personality. When you're a councillor, you can't walk away. If someone's coming at you because the garbage collection's on the wrong day, or why won't the council know that soccer pitch more times than they do, you can't just say, oh, look into it and walk away from it, because it's a small town. And most take the sporting field thing. My thought on that is if you want to play the sport, you mean it. It's your cricket field, right? And don't come trying to move on to someone else. And so I really didn't have the personality. And I went to a few council meetings after that and just watched the successful councillors, how they dealt with it, and then the newbies, how it was getting under their goat.
So you didn't have another tilt. Tell me about the controversial issues. I also was a quote when you were the president of the Chamber of Commerce, a number of controversial issues John Randall dealt with, the RV friendly debate and the 7-day trading in Warwick.
Ah, yes. The RV.
I'll have the short story if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
but very, very, very short story. There were people in town who didn't want free RV. It was all about welcoming RVs, free RV parking, free toilets, free showers, free everything. The local caravan parks hated that. Council made a decision not to be an RV town. So I called, or someone called, when I was the president of the Chamber of Commerce, one of the executive members called this public town meeting to discuss the RV debate. The consensus at the meeting was in opposition to the council's position on it. And so it was a democratic decision. I had to take that to council, and they saw that. Some people on council saw that as being a conflict of interest.
You as the president of the Chamber of Commerce had a
and what I was
conflict of
doing
interest.
was it was the same as doing a market survey. I had this meeting, and I was trying to control the meeting, a very heated meeting, and I'd never heard this expression before. And this guy from a caravan park, when I told him that he had enough say, he yelled back at me, "And who died and made you God?" I'd never heard that before, and I like that one. Anyway, the other one was the 7-day trading.
Has Warwick got 7-day trading now? I'm
Yes.
ashamed to say I don't know.
7-day trading. Once again, the council voted against 7-day trading. As council, they go through their things, right? And then the chamber decided that 7-day trading would be good. It's really the Main Street traders versus the big guys like Woolworths and Coles. Woolworths and Coles wanted it. Woolworths and the chamber saw it. If Woolworths and Coles wanted it, they would keep grocery money in town rather than coming to dreaded Toowoomba and spending their money there, right? 7-day trading is optional. So if you've got a jewellery shop in the main street of Warwick, you don't have to open. But there was quite a bit of furphies and misinformation about that. But I actually went to we had I think it's the Arbitration Commission, whoever hears it, here at the Toowoomba Courthouse. And the mayor was there representing, Ron Bellingham was there representing the council's view, as in opposing it. I was there representing the Chamber of Commerce. We travelled.
Did you stop work for council at that stage?
Yeah, I was working for council.
Are you still working for council?
Yeah, still working for council. And we travelled up in the same car and had lunch together. And so it was granted because the
Right.
Main Street traders didn't have to open.
Yeah. So, John, I understand that you're probably bound by confidentiality clause, but you did have an unfair dismissal agreement or something that went in your favour. How stressful was that at the time?
On reflection, my legal representation, I should have gone more for it. Small town, you pick your friendly lawyer. He really wasn't up to the thing. But then referred to a barrister in Brisbane who had done hundreds of these, and he did it very well. We knew what the outcome would be as soon as we started, but you just have to go through. And it's almost like those you'd be old enough to remember those French farces where people open, on those live theatre things, where people come running in out of doors, see someone run back in. That's how barristers operate at the Industrial Commission. Like, my barrister and I knew what our bottom line was. The opposition, the council's barrister knew, well, I didn't know, but knew what we would go to. But they would start low, we would start high, and
Had to go through the motions.
uh,
Was the whole thing sucked up in legal fees, though?
no, no,
No. Yeah.
it was because it is quite a common event. It's a common event to circumvent normal HR procedures. And so many barristers and lawyers
Know what
who
they're
actually
doing.
deal in that all
Yeah.
day long. So the legal fees were reasonable, comparable to the outcome.
Yeah. And was it sort of more on principle for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, you are quite famous for saying you're going to write your own eulogy because you don't want people to be writing it about you after you've passed away. So I want to talk to you about some of the things that you didn't do in your life. What didn't you do in 1965? Was it something to do with your parents'
Yeah,
expectations?
my parents' expectations, like even back in the 60s, were always that every parent wants their child to go better than they did. And for some reason, my father thought I should be a pharmacist. Back in those days, they called him a chemist. I had no interest in chemistry apart from lighting the Bunsen burner in the chemistry lab. You know, I used to do that. You used to get about a metre long a flame. That was my only interest in chemistry. So to get away from that pressure, I finished school and got a job, as you could then. You read the Country Life, positions vacant. And I thought, oh yeah, where's Aramac? I've never heard of Aramac. So I made up this really great application. Back in those days, that's how you got jobs, by your application. And 2 weeks later, I got this telegram, position yours, be on the blah, blah, blah train. So I went jackarooing. And
You'd
I,
been a total city boy.
I
Had you ever been on
total
a horse before?
been on.
A horse.
Oh yeah, I had a interest in horses, but coming from a non-horse background, and my parents couldn't afford horses. So yeah, so I turned up there. I borrowed someone's hat. Back then there was those short brim silly hats, and from a friend, and my friend's hat size was a lot smaller than mine. So if I moved my head quickly, the hat would fall off. And to get to Aramac, you had to catch the Rocky Mail overnight to Rockhampton from Brisbane, and then the old Inlander, Midlander, whatever it was, out to Barcaldine, and then this funny little tram thing up to Aramac, and which
Yeah.
took about 2 days to get there.
Yeah,
And
really great time in your life. Are you still friendly with some of those people?
very, that is, I play bridge at the Downs Club with a couple of guys every week, and there are people there, and most of them I think are older than me, but we have mutual friends and acquaintances from that period. What's that, 50, 60 years ago?
Yeah,
And
wonderful.
and you can talk. And one thing I've learned about maintaining those friendships or reigniting those friendships is that you're always very careful about talking to whatever happened to so and so if you may have had some form of short-term romantic fling with them, because I remember going out to Longreach back in the BHP days, and something, I don't know why we were there. Oh, something to do with some huge, big fencing contract, whatever it was. And as the night wore on, I said, whatever happened to, and I won't even use her name now in case she listened to it, but whatever happened to so-and-so? Oh, yes, this bloke said she's still around. I said, oh, God, she was a good girl. She used to share her favours around. Lucky I didn't have to wait too long in the queue. And the guy walked off. And I thought, oh, well, I must go to the loo or something like that. I found out the next morning at breakfast at the hotel, there was that guy's wife.
Yes, you could see that coming a mile away. Tell me what you didn't do in 1974.
I didn't accept a promotion. And I was back in Brisbane. I was a three-piece suit with a black leather briefcase. Whatever the boss said to do was in your interest. I didn't accept this job as sales manager in Darwin. 3 weeks after I was supposed to have arrived, the company house was literally blown off. And I've got a photo of, the old Highset house in Darwin. And all that was left was the timber floor. So that would have been the people who stayed in Darwin, who were able to stay, allowed to stay in Darwin and work through it, I take my hat off to them. I went up there work-wise a couple of years later, and it was only half done. It hadn't been finished.
Well, at the Darwin Arts and Cultural Centre, they've got a reenactment of you can go into a room to hear the sound. I was only there a couple of weeks ago of what the cyclone was like, and they've got all these fantastic photos of,
Yes.
and these little kids sort of with I Survived Darwin
Oh,
1974.
yes.
I want to know the story. And I'm not sure what you didn't do this night, but what happened in 1986 when you were in a lift with Lady Flo Bjelke Petersen?
That was in my midlife crisis stage. I just managed to divorce my first wife, and I was footloose and fancy free. And it was a work do at the Sheraton, which is now the Sofitel in Brisbane. And I got this white tuxedo, and I used to get my hair done at Stefan's. And the girl said, where are you going tonight? She said, oh, I'll spray some gold dust. So gold dust on the hair, a white dinner jacket, got into the lift, and there was Flo. Whether she had a string bag full of groceries, I don't know, but there was Flo. She was going to the same function. And because of my outfit, she mistook me for a singer at the time, Simon Gallagher. I don't think I look anything like him, but anyway, and she said to me, oh, and I didn't hear her say, Simon, what are you going to sing tonight? And I just made up a few, I said, Moon River, just a couple of whatever things, which I can't sing. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. So we got out of the lift, and as we got out of the lift, her minders came and got her, and she'd come along, and I sat at the table. And luckily, Flo talks to everyone at once, and she didn't feel she had to introduce me. So when the real Simon, and then they said, ladies and gentlemen, Simon Gallagher, that's when I moved back to the table I was supposed to be sitting at. So yeah, I've seen her since, and she doesn't remember her faux pas or my faux pas. But it was, it was a
And
funny
did
thing in the
I
80s.
read that you got a job from that brief encounter at that table as well?
Yes.
You're feeling very
I went
tinny
to
and
work.
very 80s in your, wasn't Christopher Skase or someone like that gave you a job?
No, it was in the Premier's department. And I've still got the letter, sadly water stained. And back in those days, you just get these letters of introduction, you'd flash them around. This was a letter from Joe.
Off the back of that meeting with that
from,
dinner
from
with
Lady
Flo.
Flo, and there I ended up in the state government, in their export side. And that, talk about things that you were right about in the past, which turned out to be correct, or things that you were wrong about. Right about, I met shortly after Kevin Rudd. And I got to see quite a bit of Kevin Rudd and the way Kevin Rudd behaves. And at the time, I thought you would be a total...
Add to that swear jar.
No swear jar. No. I'm trying to think which path he'd be. but a very dictatorial, demanding. That's probably dictatorial, demanding style of boss. And at times the swear jar would be full. And it really turned out to be true that I was, and people said, "Oh no, he's this lovely, very diplomat." I think his background was a diplomat, very diplomatic, but I really pressed the right buttons or not press the right buttons, and you'd totally lose the plot and reduce people to quivers.
It's calling the Chinese rat effers, I suppose, I think.
Yeah.
But didn't you not refer to him as an apex predator if we don't want
Yeah.
Mr. Rudd coming and
I
suing us for
thought that was
defamation?
better than sociopath. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just used to be very amused when he made it to the lodge in Canberra, how he always came across as very well measured and this and that. And I thought, Kevin, you're not like that at all. And then next day here in the Guardian or somewhere, that he's reduced a flight attendant to tears because he got the wrong chicken sandwich or there wasn't a hairdryer.
They did have that foppish sort of hair. So you mentioned before that you love to play bridge. You play mahjong as well?
Yes.
Yeah. And you and I both share our love for Arts National,
Yes.
which we are going to tonight.
Yeah.
What drew you to Arts National?
Arts National was a mutual friend of ours, Bernadette Carroll. And Bernadette Carroll were in the backseat of a car going off to Clifton or somewhere one Sunday afternoon to do something. And she started talking about Florence Broadhurst, a wallpaper designer, big name for those who remember in the 60s. And and I met Florence, like, I lived in Sydney for 12 months when you could afford to live in Paddington, Glenmore Road. And Florence was, I was on the outskirts of that type of set. And I always found her almost a Kevin Rudd style of person, very talented and obviously very talented. But I said g'day all once, that was it, right? And so I saw something on TV, there was a documentary on her. And then when Bernadette started talking about she'd gone to, it was called, what's it called, Arts National?
It's called ADFAS.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Australia
Australian
Decorative
Design
Fine
and
Arts.
Fine Arts. Yes,
And she was
ADFAS.
talking about that. And so that sounds really interesting because I've always struggled to find a creative arts appreciation learning group. I mean, we have the Art Society here, but unless you want to paint or learn to paint or whatever, that's not where you learn about art. And I was really intrigued, and I think I've missed one in 2 years, and they put on excellent speakers. And some of the topics, when you read them, you think, "Oh God, I'll be asleep in the first 5 minutes." But the speakers are such good educators that, and some of them are local, not local, some of them are Australian, American, or overseas, and they really do earn their pieces of silver.
I agree. It's one of my great joys every month going to an Arts National lecture.
Yes.
John, do you know anything about the Royals? You got a passing interest in them at all?
My favourite royal, a book I read recently, was called Ma'am Darling. Ma'am, Darling. And it was written by Lady Anne Glenconnan, who is a very, she's someone they always go to when a queen dies or a king comes in. And she always has the inside knowledge, but she says it in the right way. And Ma'am Darling referred to the usual greeting that friends of Princess Margaret. So when they came for coffee, or wasn't coffee, when they came for a gin and tonic with their old Megs, they would be shown in, and they would come, they would bow their head and say, "Ma'am," and then kiss her and say, "Darling." So she was a very formal type of person. But I really, and being someone at times of an extravagant nature, then throwing caution to the wind, she had a pretty, well, living in the shadow of her sister, the Queen at the time, her disastrous fling to Townsend, and the way that she foolishly linked up with that Welsh photographer, that she deserved to be able to let her hair down. And I think she did. And I think if I was the male equivalent of the second son to the heir of the throne, I think I'd behave like her. She was always stylish. I don't think they should show any of those photos of her with those wraparound sunglasses with her feet in booties, because she was, I always thought she was inspirational, but just, hey, it was.
The middle finger flipping the bed.
It was.
Do you know, John, I've got a
yes.
confession to make. I've been doing Big Little Small Talk for a really long time, heard lots of people's favourite royal. And do you know who my favourite royal is?
Yes.
Princess Margaret.
Ah, really?
Because of the smoking and the sunbaking
Yes.
and the vodkas and
Yes.
the being on Ibiza and just the, the
Yes.
FU lifestyle. I think, I have always loved her. I think she was the first person who stimulated my interest in the royals. But I must move on. What is the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
My wife Karen and I used to dance to a Vegemite song. And as I said before, I have a very eclectic taste in music. And two songs, and one because it was the first night that, I have to rewind this. Anyway, it was at the Dolby B&S 30 years ago, 38 years ago. And they were playing, because the band had got drunk and gone home or something. They were playing Midnight Oil and Beds Are Burning. And I know where it was. Beds Are Burning, because when we went back to her parents' house, her parents were away, someone had turned the electric, because it's cold as buggery in June in Dolby, and someone had turned the electric blanket up. And we got into this very small bed, and we got quite toasted very quickly lying in it. So Beds Are Burning is I actually like the rhythm of the song. And the other one, which always gets me up, which probably sounds a bit naffish, is Frankenfurter and from the Rocky Horror Show. The Time Warp. And apart from the song, and I think I've seen, self-compassion here, I think I've seen Rocky Horror about 6 times live, twice in Japanese. That is amazing. And Frankenfurter in his fishnet stockings. And it's just a happy song.
Can you do the movements?
Yes.
You can. So even in Japanese, you knew where they were up to.
Yeah. I was the only, it was some little, when I was traveling up there for work, and there was some little theatre, nothing like the huge Q-Packs, whatever. And half of them were Japanese and half of them were American. Riff Raff looked very strange. Yeah, it was culturally a bit complex as far as what the actors did and the sound they made. And the strange thing was, half of it was in Japanese, all the vocab, all the dialogue was in Japanese, but the songs were in English. And
you did sing along. Well, John, unfortunately, I've run out of time, and I think somehow I suspect that you might have had another program in you in terms of stories and things, but it's just been a delight. So thank you so much for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad, because I first thought that you wanted me to read for a part in a local production of Big Little Lies, and I was trying to work out which, because all the blokes in that are pretty nasty, aren't they?
I think so.
So I'm glad it is Big Little Small Talk.
And you've done very well. Thank you. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.
You've been listening to a 102.7 FM Toowoomba original podcast. For more podcasts or to listen to live and local Toowoomba radio, please visit 1027.com.au or download the Community Radio Plus app.